In the new Superman, the Man of Steel is brought down by Lex Luthor's most nefarious scheme yet, hacking his private data. No, really, that's what part of the movie is about. How do I keep my data super safe online? That's right, NordVPN. You can learn more and try the NordVPN 2-year plan plus 4 months extra by going to nordvpn.com/moviebob or follow the link in the description, risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. VPNs help you, your PC, your workstation, your tablet, your whatever. I'm an old guy, we just called it the computer. Be in more than one place at one time, even if you're not. In an age where more and more content is getting restricted, siloed, or censored, NordVPN is all about making the internet more free and letting you see and share more information. The way the web ought to be. Like I said, check it out for yourself and see what you might have been missing. Click the link in the description or go to nordvpn.com/moviebob to get the NordVPN 2-year plan plus 4 months extra risk-free with Nord's 30-day money-back guarantee. And now, on to the show. Alright, so several folks opined that it would be convenient if a section where we summarized how comic book eras are differentiated and why the new Superman movie is or isn't reflective of a certain one, i.e. is it more Silver Age or Bronze Age as a movie, from a recent somewhat longer episode that also veered off into some cowboy movie business, could be segmented off on its own for the viewing and sharing convenience of viewers who are more interested in one than the other, especially now that we've got Fantastic Four, which is much more distinctly a 100% Silver Age movie in some distinctly interesting ways, and yeah, that sounds reasonable. But also, I never want to recycle, so I got some quick additional related rough new thoughts on Fantastic Four to add into the original mix as well, so yeah, here's that. The term a lot of people keep using to describe this, and a lot of other recent movies in the genre, but especially this, is calling it a Silver Age comic book movie in terms of its aesthetic and points of reference, and I understand why that is. Silver Age is widely understood as the generic catch-all term for not dark like modern comics, but also not super old-fashioned like World War II comics, which everyone knows was called the Golden Age, which was followed by the Silver Age, so that's the term that gets used for this movie has primary colors in it. But one of the most interesting thing that sticks out to me about James Gunn's approach to this movie, and several of the other DC projects he's produced and or directed so far, is that so much of its point of reference isn't coming from the Silver Age, or necessarily present-day comics, or just somewhere else in the ether. A lot of this actually feels specifically like Bronze Age DC, and a good helping of early modern age.
Another shocking twist!
Just to get us all on the same page, in superhero comic shorthand, the Golden Age generally means the mid-30s to the mid-50s, so introduction of Superman himself, World War II, and the Comics Code blowing everything up. Silver Age is the 50s to the 70s, death of Gwen Stacy in 1973 usually makes a good cutoff, then the 70s to the mid-80s is the Bronze Age, usually cutting off at 1986, when DC publishes Crisis on Infinite Earths, Watchmen, and The Dark Knight Returns, all in the span of about a year. After Bronze is modern, and also nobody really agrees whether there are more era distinctions beyond that. Like, most people just cut it off at Bronze and call the mid-80s onwards a permanent present because that's the age a lot of people who were in charge of the professional collector scene became professional collectors, so they've decided they're the end of history because of course they did, but you'll find other people who break it up by Copper Age, Iron Age, Bubble Age, Dark Age, etc. It's all very arbitrary.
I have some theories on that, which I will share with you never.
What's important is the mid-70s to the early 90s DC was Bronze and early modern age DC, and it really feels like so far that, much more so than the Silver Age or anything else, is the nostalgia reference point that's going into James Gunn's DC universe, at least in what we've seen of the Suicide Squad, Peacemaker, Creature Commandos, and now Superman. And that's really interesting because the Bronze Age and early modern age was a very interesting, awkward, creatively fertile, throw stuff at the wall time for DC, because it was the point where Marvel had been the dominant big idea player in the market for a long time, and they were getting really antsy to prove that they could do big things and flex different muscles than the fun heroes for kids books that they'd still been mainly known for in the Silver Age. Which makes it really interesting that now, like right now as theatrical brands, at least for the two current movies, it's sort of mirror reversed in as much as Fantastic Four is doing a Silver Age retro future 60s style aesthetic, but also using it largely to signal a literal utopianism for its setting. Like, the difference between Marvel books and DC books in the 60s was generally that DC was old-fashioned and harkened back to 30s and 40s style good versus evil heroism and traditional values, where Marvel was edgier and topical and had flawed, more humanized characters, inhabiting a morally complex universe more reflective of the real world. But now in movie form, Superman, a DC movie, however colorful and cheery and full of space dogs and earnest big blue Boy Scouts saving squirrels, is a very topical work about journalists exposing corruption, geopolitics, immigration, stopping genocide, getting people out of black site prisons, billionaires abusing the media, and people getting ruined by internet doxing, while Fantastic Four from Marvel is basically an escapist nostalgia sci-fi fantasy about a carousel of progress tomorrow Tomorrowland world that has advanced retro cool super science tech and seemingly all of its big supervillain and crime issues basically handled before the movie even starts because 4 people with crazy powers and cool inventions just kinda solved all the things, apparently. Which, it would be great if an all-American nuclear family, but more powerful, became the Lord Protectors of the global hegemon, actually, is definitionally a power and comfort fantasy of the 1960s, and thus very authentically Silver Age, but it's not really overly typical of the vibe for Marvel, even in this, its most mom and dad franchise of any age. That's why Marvel books made a pretty clean, gradual transition from their Silver to Bronze Age, whereas Bronze Age DC was when Wonder Woman briefly loses her powers and becomes a martial arts master, and then gets several other reboots before the full one from George Perez after Crisis, when Green Arrow was completely retooled into the leftist political figure that's now his default characterization, when the Earth 2 alt timeline comics with characters like the original Justice Society, Infinity Inc., Huntress, and Power Girl were being published regularly, Jason Todd becomes Robin, and Dick Grayson becomes Nightwing and forms the new Teen Titans in the transition period between the Bronze and Modern Age. John Byrne's Man of Steel reboot is another capper to the Bronze Age that follows off of Crisis, and the Bronze Age Justice League is very much the version that Super Friends was building off of, and that's proved very retroactively influential via cross-pollination. The Hall of Justice is in the Superman movie. It was also the last big era for Justice League Crisis crossovers before Infinite Earths closed that up. And then the Modern Age brings us Justice League International, which the new movie's Justice Gang is clearly influenced by, and speaking of transition and influence, that 80s to 90s Bronze to Modern to Dark 90s thematic chain doesn't just include those 3 medium-defining books in 86, it also includes all their direct domino effect links to biggies like Killing Joke, Nightfall, Death of Superman, Emerald Twilight, and all that business that comes after them. I could keep going, but
You're living in a dream world!
Good.
suffice to say, seeing so much 70s to 80s DC vibe in this movie at the same point that the people in charge of this supposed universe have been talking up movies and shows for stuff like Booster Gold and Swamp Thing, that Lanterns show, makes me really interested to see what they've got cooking. And now having seen Fantastic Four, I'm equally curious to see what the opposite take on this looks like, because I want to be clear, I don't think there's something wrong or bad about the story and aesthetic they used. I really liked the movie, it's terrific, everybody should go see it. I was just surprised there wasn't seemingly another layer to it, at least in this movie, because typically in a movie or TV show or game, whatever, at least as they've been made over the last 20, 30, 40 years, when they give you an alternate world setup, and they set it up as a suspiciously awesome utopia with the aesthetic of an earlier problematic point in history, like think Pleasantville, Camazotz and A Wrinkle in Time, Don't Worry Darling, Marvel's own WandaVision, something else is usually going on, and it's not on the up and up. Like, even the last time Marvel showed us a utopian alternate timeline that was like the MCU, but more futuristic and colorful and peaceful, seemingly, it turned out the heroes there had been on some shady shit and doing cover-ups, like literal Illuminati cover-ups. And now in Fantastic Four, there's nothing in the movie to indicate that their world is bad or that they're secretly evil or anything, but that's what's kind of surprising, because it feels like that's where a story usually goes when the apparent good guys are also running the UN and able to just summon the whole world's resources to do a space project in this universe. So part of me was kind of waiting for a point where another shoe was going to drop, like, okay, so the Fantastic Four are like in charge of the planet in this timeline. Are the benevolent superheroes who kind of run this whole world, are they not totally good? Or is the point of this that they meant well, but it's like the Tony Stark Age of Ultron thing again, and letting a superhero run the planet is shockingly not a great idea, actually? Actually, wait, speaking of Tony Stark, is that it? Is this like that Illuminati versus Doctor Strange stuff again? Did they do one of those? Is that why and or how Robert Downey Jr. is Doctor Doom? But I don't know, that's possibly me reading too much into the fact that there isn't more to read into here. It's more or equally likely that just like Superman is colorful and bizarre while also being topical and confrontational, less because it's evoking comics of the 70s and 80s, and more because fun but also smart and current is James Gunn's prime creative setting. Fantastic Four is doing space age 60s nostalgia on a hopeful setting with no irony or actually callouts, because it's the best way for Marvel to pivot from their universe, characters, and genre at its darkest movie, aka Thunderbolts, the most recent one, to a 180-degree opposite of that in tone, tenor, and vibe before they smash those two tones and several others together in the next big two crossover things. Then again, they've also done Reed Richards but bad in the comics, so that other shoe could still be waiting. Who knows? Should be interesting. Actually, both tracks of this look very interesting going forward, and I'm sure it will have much more to talk about. I'm Bob, and that's The Big Picture.